Hello. Dreadlock Jackie Walker, Jeremy Corbyn stalwart and ex-vice chair of the Labour Party left group Momentum, was speaking at an Antifa event in Berlin, and I happened upon the hour-long video of it. I thought, well, everybody says bad things about Jackie Walker, so I shouldn't have them make up my mind for me. I should try to see if she's really as bad as everyone says they are, for myself. And I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing, but neither do I want anyone to think that I've been cherry-picking her nutcasery, so I shall give the address of the video in the description. And meanwhile, I'll present to you a short analysis of her Q&A session. First, a little background. Jackie got into trouble because she turned out to be too extreme, even for Momentum. And that's saying something. They thought she was offensive, and that's saying something. And apparently the leader of the TSSA union, that's the Transport Salaried Staffs Association, which I've been told is extremely militant, actually threatened to resign if Walker was not given her marching orders. Yeah, Walker, marching orders, yeah, never mind. Just a bit about Walker. She proudly identifies herself as a black Jew, which tells you not much about her, although she seems to think that that's significant. But what this little clip does tell you is her obvious inability to stand outside herself most of the time and actually listen to what she's saying. Once or twice, a little sort of glimmer breaks through, but it doesn't happen very often. For those of you uninterested in British politics or the Labour Party, or indeed Jackie Walker herself, perhaps you might be interested in seeing an archetypal Antifa brain at work. Enjoy.
So I was just wondering, how do you think, or in your experience, are these contemporary discourses denouncing anti-Semitism compatible with actual anti-Semitism, or how they are propagating anti-Semitism?
Okay, I get it. I think they're complicit with anti-Semitism. I mean, it's not a coincidence that we see from India to Poland to the Czech Republic to the UK, and I believe even in Germany, that the most far-right parties, the most nationalist parties, the most racist parties are falling over themselves to talk about anti-Semitism.
So here we have the first of Ms. Walker's sweeping generalisations. What do you mean? Everybody's bending over backwards not to be anti-Semitic. There's plenty of anti-Semitism all the way across the world from various right-wing parties. Some of them are not official parties because the countries have made anti-Semitism, or at least avowed anti-Semitism, illegal. Well, that doesn't stop them. In Hungary, there's the Jobbik Party, I hope I pronounced that right, which keeps talking about globalism, which is a code word for Jews, in this case especially George Soros. In Poland, there's the Law and Justice Party, which helped to push through a revised statute in the Polish parliament, making it illegal for anyone to blame Poland for Nazi crimes, when everybody knows the Poles were complicit in many of the Nazi crimes. And furthermore, of the surviving Jews that got back to Poland after the war, many of them were murdered by their Polish neighbours who had appropriated the property of the kidnapped people who they thought would never return. In France, it's mostly Muslims. There isn't a specific party, but there are plenty of Muslims going around unchecked, saying some pretty terrible things, living in areas which are not controlled by the French government, and coming out occasionally to murder Jews, specifically to murder Jews, and they make no bones about that. Or rather, they make plenty of bones. And in Germany, the same thing. And there's a recent sort of bleakly amusing story of an Israeli Arab who thought maybe the Jews in Israel were exaggerating things. He walked around Berlin wearing one of those Jewish skull caps and ended up having to be rescued from an attack by a Muslim who saw him and started beating him.
I mean, I can't talk about what's happening in Germany, but what I know, for example, in the UK, is that our most racist newspapers, so in our case it would be a newspaper called The Mail.
And this racist paper was the only newspaper that took up the Stephen Lawrence case. What happened, if you haven't heard of Stephen Lawrence, was that he was a fine young man who was heading to be an architect and could have been a great asset to our society and possibly the whole world, was murdered while he was waiting for a bus in Eltham in London. The police arrested 5 young thugs. Oh, I'm sorry. Stephen Lawrence was black. 5 young thugs the police arrested were white. They didn't do anything about it. They released the young men, if you can call them men. And then they proceeded to cover up their incompetence by implying that Stephen Lawrence was a criminal. They suggested he was drug dealing. They suggested his friends started the fight. They brought his whole family into disrepute. And the only newspaper that actually believed the family's record of the events was the Daily Mail. And for 15 years, from about February 1997, the Daily Mail pursued a campaign to get the Lawrence's story out. In 2004, Scotland Yard decided to close the case, and the Mail kept on going. This is the most racist newspaper in Britain, according to Jackie Walker. If that's the case, then I wish there were more racist papers of that sort, because you know what? The Guardian believed the police. They were behind the police the whole time. It was just the racist Mail that went to bat for this black kid. Well, Walker can accuse them of racism, but I don't.
The Mail, oh great. So the Mail has suddenly become race conscious, but only conveniently for anti-Semitism.
Only when people like you conveniently forget about things like the Stephen Lawrence case. Yes, Jackie, darling?
And you know why that is? It costs them nothing. In fact, it gains them a huge amount of power, because that's all they're after. They don't give a monkeys about minorities. The people talking, many of the people talking about anti-Semitism now.
Did you notice how she had to modify what she said there? She started off with the people talking about anti-Semitism, and then she realised just how sweeping she'd been and had to say many of the people talking, because her default was all of them, because that's how she sees the world.
Don't care about minorities. And I'd like to bring something from the conference that we were at yesterday, which I think is really, really true.
At which point the English teacher kicks in. You can't be really, really true. You can be true. You're either true or you're not true. Truth is an absolute, except for somebody like Jackie Walker, because she has her truth. She doesn't see truth as an absolute. So if she's talking about something and she thinks it's an absolute truth, she has to say it's really, really true.
And actually, being in Germany has solidified this as an idea for me. That in fact, what's happened with the old anti-Semitism is it's been recycled into the new Islamophobia.
Well, you see, I have to explain to everybody who doesn't realise this, but you aren't a proper socialist if you can't bring everything back to Islamophobia. The fact that Muslims are blowing up people in supermarkets and theatres has nothing whatsoever to do with it.
And that anti-Semitism, in terms of the dislike of the Jews, hatred of the Jews, has actually been adopted by the right and the establishment for its own purposes.
Well, I'm not too sure about the right using anti-Semitism for its own purposes, but it's been pretty useful for the Labour Party, hasn't it? Their voter base among Muslims in the inner cities is going up and up and up since they started their anti-Semitic programme. It's become so pronounced that a Labour MP is now going to sue the Labour Party for anti-Semitism because they have changed their constitution in order to accommodate such opinions.
In fact, many of the people that we have in England talking about anti-Semitism are the worst anti-Semites you'd ever find in your life.
And I refer, Miss Walker, to my previous statement.
Mind you, that doesn't stop Netanyahu from inviting them home for dinner.
I'd like to know to whom she is referring at that point, because I don't know what anti-Semites Netanyahu has invited home for dinner. You may like or dislike Netanyahu. I think he's a slimeball personally, but I don't recall him inviting Nazis to dinner. On the other hand, I do recall some occasion when Jeremy Corbyn invited a bunch of Hamas people over to tea in the Houses of Parliament, which I am paying for with my taxes, and calling them his friends. And these are people who have talked about exterminating every last Jew on the planet. I don't think Netanyahu comes anything close to that.
But this is typical of Zionists. They've always done this. They are quite happy to sup with the devil to get what they want.
And my thanks to Guido Fawkes for this bit of research.
But this is typical of Zionists. They've always done this. They are quite happy to sup with the devil to get what they want.
Well, Jackie, considering Hamas's proclivities, I'd say that Jeremy Corbyn has been doing quite a bit of supping with the devil. By your definition, does that make Jeremy Corbyn a Zionist?
Is that enough?
Well, it was enough for me. I'm very grateful for financial contributions, but if you don't want to give money, you can still help a lot by sharing this and other videos I've made. Also, remember to check your subscription from time to time, as sometimes subscriptions get erased for one reason or another. Till next time.